The assembly hall floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of light and metal. It orbited Axiom Prime, a world that belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. Inside the massive structure, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for their annual meeting. The Galactic Concordate Summit was the one time each year when all the great powers came together to discuss trade, borders, and peace. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the human delegation section, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Around her, the assembly hall buzzed with 100 different languages translated instantly by the neural implants all delegates wore. The hall itself was enormous, with sections for each member species rising in curved tiers around a central speaking platform. Elena looked across the chamber at the other delegations. The Vrix hegemony occupied the largest section, their insectoid forms glittering under the lights. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and chitinous armor that grew naturally from their bodies. Their war prince Krex sat on a raised throne, his mandibles clicking in what Elena had learned was their version of laughter. To the left sat the Kelthara sovereignty. These reptilian beings moved with liquid grace, their scales shifting colors to reflect their moods. Their overseer, a being named Sithrak, watched the proceedings with vertical slit eyes that seemed to look through rather than at things. The Kelthara were known for their psychic abilities, though they kept the true extent of their powers secret. The Morvain Collective occupied a specially designed section filled with superheated atmosphere. They were silicon-based life forms, their bodies resembling living crystals that pulsed with internal light. They communicated through harmonic vibrations that the translation systems struggled to interpret accurately. Dozens of smaller kingdoms and federations filled the remaining sections. Some were humanoid, others were so alien that Elena still had trouble understanding how they perceived reality. All of them had one thing in common. They had been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. Humanity had joined only 80 years ago. The speaker of the Concordate, an ancient being from a species that looked like floating jellyfish, called the assembly to order. The chamber fell silent. Elena felt her heart beat faster. Today was the day humanity would present their proposal. The Concordate recognizes Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth, the speaker announced. Elena walked down the steps to the central platform. She felt thousands of eyes on her, some curious, most dismissive. She reached the podium and activated the holographic display. A map of the border territories appeared above her, showing the disputed regions where human space met the territories of 3 minor kingdoms. Honored delegates, Elena began, her voice steady despite her nerves. Humanity comes before you today with a proposal for peace. The border territories between Earth's colonies and the Thexian Union, the Core Federation and the Palaxi dynasty, have been a source of tension for the past decade. Rather than allow these tensions to escalate, we propose a resource-sharing agreement. The holographic display showed her plan, the asteroid fields and nebula regions that both sides claimed would be jointly managed. Profits would be split according to a fair formula based on development investment. A neutral commission would handle disputes. We believe that cooperation benefits all parties more than conflict, Elena continued. The resources in these regions are abundant enough for everyone. There is no need for bloodshed when there can be prosperity. She finished her presentation and looked up at the assembled delegates. For a moment there was silence. Then the laughter began. War Prince Krex rose from his throne. His massive form cast a shadow across the chamber. The human speaks of sharing, he said, his voice like grinding stones. She speaks of cooperation. Tell me, Ambassador, how many wars has your species won against galactic powers? Elena kept her expression neutral. We have fought no wars against galactic powers, War Prince. That is precisely the point. We seek to avoid such conflicts. Exactly. Kahrex's mandibles clacked together in amusement. You are soft-shelled creatures playing at diplomacy. You have no concept of strength. The strong take what they need. The weak beg for scraps. Your proposal is the bleating of prey asking the predator to share the hunting ground. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Elena saw delegates from the minor kingdoms openly mocking her. The Kelthara overseer's scales rippled with colors that the translation system interpreted as disdain. Earth is a backwater, Overseer Sithrak said, his voice silky and cold. You arrived in our galaxy barely a lifetime ago. You have no great fleets. Your worlds number in the dozens while ours number in the thousands. You speak of peace because you have no capacity for war. This is not wisdom, Ambassador. It is weakness wearing the mask of virtue. Elena felt anger burn in her chest, but she forced it down. We have capacity for war, she said quietly. We choose not to exercise it. There is a difference, is there? Kehrex leaned forward. Then prove it. Challenge the Thexian Union for those territories. Fight for what you claim is yours. Show the Concordat that humanity deserves its seat at this table. The speaker intervened. The Concordat was founded on principles of diplomatic resolution, War Prince. Yes, yes, Kehrex waved a clawed hand dismissively. But even diplomacy requires strength behind it. What leverage does humanity bring? What makes their proposal anything more than begging? Elena looked around the chamber. She saw it in their faces, in their body language, in the way they looked at her. They did not respect humanity. They saw Earth as a curiosity, a weak newcomer that had stumbled into the galactic community and now presumed to have opinions. I see, Elena said softly. The Concordat will not support our proposal? The Concordat takes no position on minor territorial disputes, the speaker said formally. Your proposal will be noted in the records, but it requires the agreement of all involved parties. The Thexian Union, Core Federation, and Palaxi Dynasty have not indicated support. The representatives from those three kingdoms practically radiated smugness. One of them, a Thexian with blue-gray skin, stood up. Humanity may keep what it currently holds, but it will expand no further. Those are our terms. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was not about resources or territory. This was about power and respect. The galaxy was telling humanity to know its place. She was about to return to her seat when the alert sirens began to wail. The holographic display flickered and changed. A new image appeared, a human colony ship, the New Horizon, drifting in space. Its hull was torn open. Debris spread around it in a cloud of frozen atmosphere and bodies. What is this? The speaker demanded. Admiral Marcus Chen, who had been sitting silently in the human delegation, stood up. His face was grim. That is the New Horizon. She was carrying 15,000 colonists to New Terra. She was attacked 6 hours ago in neutral space. The display zoomed in on the damage. The weapon signatures were unmistakable. Frick's plasma cannons had torn through the civilian vessel. Elena turned to look at War Prince Kehrex. The massive insectoid sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. But he did not deny it. The New Horizon was in neutral space, Elena said, her voice sharp now. She was unarmed. She carried families, children. War Prince, did your forces do this? Kehrex stood slowly. A Vrix patrol encountered an unidentified vessel in a disputed region. The vessel failed to respond to hails. It was engaged according to standard military protocols. Disputed region? Admiral Chen's voice cracked like a whip. That was neutral space. 3 light-years from the nearest claimed system. And the New Horizon transmitted identification and peaceful intent. We have the communications logs. Then your vessel's communication systems were faulty, Kehrex said dismissively. This is an unfortunate accident, but accidents happen in space, especially to those too weak to defend themselves. Elena felt the rage building inside her. 15,000 people, families, children, dead because the Vrix wanted to send a message about strength. Ambassador Vasquez, the speaker said, Earth may file a formal complaint. The Concordat will investigate this incident. Investigate? Elena's voice rose despite her training. 15,000 humans are dead. The evidence is clear. War Prince Kehrex just admitted his forces destroyed an unarmed civilian vessel. What is there to investigate? The speaker's tendrils waved in what might have been discomfort. The Concordat must follow proper procedures. A commission will be formed. Evidence will be gathered. A judgment will be rendered. How long will this take? Admiral Chen demanded. Such investigations typically require 6 to 8 months, the speaker replied. Elena looked at the other delegates. She saw it clearly now. No one was going to help humanity. The Vrix were too powerful, too important to the Concordat's military balance. Humanity was expendable. The investigation would drag on until everyone forgot about it, and then it would be quietly dismissed. She walked back to the podium. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Let me make sure I understand the situation, she said. Humanity came to this Concordat seeking peace. We propose cooperation. We were mocked for our weakness. When our people are slaughtered, we are told to file a complaint and wait. Is that correct? The speaker's tendrils curled. Ambassador, the Concordat has procedures. Answer the question, Elena interrupted. Is that correct? Silence filled the chamber. Finally, the speaker spoke. The Concordat will investigate. That is all we can promise. Elena turned to look at War Prince Carex. The insectoid war leader met her gaze without flinching. His mandibles spread in what she recognized as a smile. You came here seeking peace, Elena said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. You have taught us that mercy is mistaken for cowardice. You have shown us that in this galaxy, strength is the only language you understand. Very well. We will remember this lesson. She turned to Admiral Chen. Admiral, recall all Earth diplomatic personnel from galactic space, effective immediately. Chen nodded. Yes, Ambassador. Elena looked back at the assembled delegates. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find friends. We found something else. We are withdrawing from all diplomatic contact. We will maintain our current borders, but will engage in no further expansion, no further trade, no further communication. Consider this our final statement. We came seeking peace. You gave us war. Now you will have neither. War Prince Carex laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. The prey scurries back to its den. How disappointing. Elena met his eyes one last time. No, War Prince. We are not scurrying away. We are going home to decide what we will become when we return. If we return, it will be on very different terms. She walked out of the assembly hall, Admiral Chen following behind her. As the doors closed, she heard the laughter and dismissive chatter resume. They thought humanity was retreating in fear. They thought Earth had learned its place. They had no idea what they had just done. On the human transport back to Earth, Elena sat in her quarters and stared out at the stars. Admiral Chen stood beside her. They will not forgive this insult, Chen said quietly. No, Elena agreed. They will not. And the new horizon? 15,000 dead. Men, women, children, dead because we were weak. Chen was silent for a long moment. There are voices on Earth calling for response. Military response. Elena closed her eyes. I know. What will you tell them, Ambassador? She opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the window. Behind her reflection, the stars shone cold and distant. I will tell them the truth, she said. That mercy is only valued when it comes from a position of strength. That peace is only respected when backed by the capacity for war. I will tell them that we tried to be better, and the galaxy taught us that better is not enough. And then we will become what we must become. We will close our borders. We will build, and when we are ready, when we are strong enough that the galaxy can no longer ignore us, then we will see if they still find humanity so amusing. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. This will change us. Yes, Elena said. It will change everything. The transport jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the Concordat assembly behind. In the Great Hall, the delegates continued their discussions, already forgetting about the humans who had stormed out. They returned to their usual concerns: trade routes, border disputes, military alliances. None of them noticed the single message that Admiral Chen transmitted before leaving Axiom Prime. It was a simple code phrase, sent on encrypted channels to every human world, every human ship, every human station. The message contained only 3 words: the door closes. Across human space, those words were received and understood. The experiment in peaceful coexistence had failed. Humanity had tried to join the galactic community as friends. They had been rejected, mocked, and murdered for their efforts. Now humanity would try something different. The countdown had begun, though the galaxy did not know it yet. They had 100 years. 100 years before they would understand what they had created, when they taught humanity that mercy was weakness. 100 years before all the kingdoms would lower their banners. The first year after humanity's withdrawal was marked by confusion more than concern. The galaxy had seen species retreat before, usually after military defeats or economic collapses. Earth's departure was unusual, only because no one had actually defeated them. They had simply left. At first, the other powers attempted to maintain contact. Trade ships arrived at human space stations only to find them abandoned. Communication channels that had carried messages for decades went silent. Diplomatic vessels sent to Earth itself were turned away at the border by automated defense platforms that politely but firmly refused all entry. Access denied, the platform said in every known language. Human space is closed until further notice. Any vessel entering human territory without authorization will be destroyed. This is your only warning. A few ships tested those warnings. They were destroyed so quickly and efficiently that most observers assumed the humans had simply improved their automated defense systems. No one considered it worth investigating further. After all, humanity was just one small power among many. If they wanted to sulk in isolation, let them. The Vrix war prince Karex declared the human withdrawal a victory. He held celebrations across the hegemony, proclaiming that the weak had finally recognized their place. The investigation into the New Horizon incident was quietly closed after 3 months. The official findings stated insufficient evidence to assign fault. No one was surprised. 10 years passed. The galactic economy barely noticed humanity's absence. The trade routes that had run through human space were divided among the neighboring powers. The Thexian Union, Core Federation, and Palaxi Dynasty expanded into the border territories that humanity had once claimed. They found them empty. The human colonies had been abandoned, their populations recalled to Earth and the core worlds. But strange reports began to filter back from these abandoned worlds. Automated systems continued to function, maintaining the colonies as if the humans might return at any moment. Ships that tried to claim the empty stations for salvage found their systems locked down by security protocols far more sophisticated than anything humanity had possessed before. And when salvage crews tried to force entry, the stations simply self-destructed. They booby-trapped everything. A Thexian captain reported after his ship barely escaped an exploding orbital platform. It is as if they do not want us to learn anything from what they left behind. The Kelthera sovereignty, curious about this behavior, sent a science vessel to study an abandoned human research station. The station orbited a gas giant in what had been human territory. The scientists approached carefully, scanning every centimeter of the structure. They found nothing. No traps, no weapons, no hidden dangers. Just an empty station with all its data cores wiped clean. The lead scientist, a young Kelthera named Velnara, ordered her team to board. They found the station in perfect condition. Power systems hummed quietly. Life support maintained comfortable temperatures. The laboratories were clean and organized. But every computer system had been thoroughly erased. Not just the data deleted, but the storage media itself had been molecularly scrambled. Whatever research the humans had been doing here, they had made certain no one else would ever know about it. Velnara stood in the main laboratory, her scales shifting to colors of deep thought. Around her, the empty station seemed to wait for something. On one wall, she found a message written in simple text. "We were here. We learned. We are gone. Do not follow." "Do not follow where?" one of her assistants asked. Velnara had no answer. 20 years after the withdrawal, the first silent zone appeared. It began as a navigation hazard. Ships traveling near human space reported strange fluctuations in their faster-than-light drives. At first, these were dismissed as normal variations in subspace conditions. But the reports increased. Ships found their FTL systems shutting down completely when they got too close to human territory. They had to crawl through the affected regions at sublight speeds, a journey that could take weeks instead of hours. "It is like space itself has become thicker," one pilot reported, "as if something is resisting our passage." The affected region formed a rough sphere centered on the human border. It was not impassable, just incredibly slow to traverse. Scientists studied the phenomenon but could not explain it. Subspace should not behave this way. There was nothing in known physics that could create such an effect across such a vast area. The Morvain Collective, whose understanding of physics was considered the most advanced in the galaxy, sent a research fleet to investigate. Their conclusion was both simple and terrifying. The effect is artificial. Someone or something is generating a field that interferes with faster-than-light travel. The power requirements would be enormous. Theoretically impossible with any known technology. Could the humans be doing this? The Concordat asked. The Morvain researchers pulsed with uncertain colors. Unknown. But if they are, it suggests capabilities we did not suspect they possessed. 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. The silent zones multiplied. 3 more appeared, then 5 more, then a dozen. They formed a shell around human space, growing larger each year. To travel anywhere near human territory now required weeks of sublight travel through the zones. Trade routes had to be completely redrawn. The economic cost was substantial, and still no one heard anything from humanity. No ships emerged from their space. No communications were detected. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Velnara, now a senior researcher with the Kelthera Sovereignty's Intelligence Division, became obsessed with understanding what had happened to humanity. She collected every scrap of information about them. She studied their history, their culture, their technology before the withdrawal. She interviewed everyone who had ever met a human. What she discovered disturbed her. Humanity, she learned, had a strange relationship with war. They had spent most of their history fighting each other, developing weapons and tactics with frightening creativity. Yet they had also created philosophies of peace, codes of honor, concepts of mercy and compassion. They were a species of contradictions, capable of both terrible violence and profound kindness. They are like a blade that chooses not to cut, Velnara wrote in her reports, but the blade remained sharp even when sheathed. She found records of humanity's first contact with the galaxy. They had approached peacefully, eager to learn and trade. Their diplomats had been sincere in their desire for cooperation. But Velnara also found classified military records that the Kelthera had gathered. Human weapons technology, even 80 years ago, had been surprisingly advanced. Not superior to galactic standard, but impressive for a species so new to interstellar travel. And there were hints of other things. Research programs into quantum computing, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, fields that other species had explored and largely abandoned as too dangerous or too difficult. Humanity had pursued all of them simultaneously. They were learning everything they could, Velnara realized. Not just what they needed, but everything. As if preparing for something, she tried to present her findings to the Kelthera overseer, but her warnings were dismissed. The humans are hiding, she was told. They are afraid. Why else would they create barriers to keep others out? When they finally emerge, if they emerge, they will find that the galaxy has moved on without them. 60 years passed. 70. 80. An entire generation had been born since humanity's withdrawal. To them, humans were almost mythical. The strange species that had appeared briefly, spoken of peace and mercy, then vanished after a single insulting incident at the Concordat. But the silent zones continued to grow. And now, new phenomena were being reported. Ships passing through the zones reported seeing structures in the distance, massive constructions that should not exist. They appeared only on long-range sensors, visible for moments before vanishing as if they had never been there. One captain, a veteran trader who had been navigating the zones for decades, swore she had seen something impossible. It was a ring, she reported. A ring large enough to encircle a star. But it was not just orbiting the star. It was moving through space in a way that makes no sense, as if it existed in multiple places at once. Scientists dismissed such reports as sensor glitches caused by the silent zone's unusual properties. But the reports kept coming. Spheres the size of planets, tubes of light that stretched between solar systems, clouds of metallic particles that moved with obvious purpose and intelligence. They are building something, Velnara insisted in her reports. The humans have not been hiding. They have been constructing. But what and why? 90 years after the withdrawal, the Vrix hegemony began to grow concerned. Their territory bordered human space more than any other power. The silent zones were beginning to interfere with their internal trade routes. War Prince Kaharex, now considerably older but no less arrogant, declared that the situation had become intolerable. We granted the humans permission to sulk in their corner of space, he announced at a Concordat session. But now their sulking affects our commerce. This cannot be allowed. We demand the Concordat take action. What action do you propose? The speaker asked. Send a fleet. Pierce the silent zones. Make contact with the humans and demand they cease whatever they are doing. If they refuse, remind them of their place. The Concordat debated for months. Most members had no desire to provoke a conflict over what was essentially a navigation inconvenience. But the Vrix were insistent, and their military power gave them considerable influence. Finally, 100 years after humanity's withdrawal, the decision was made. The Vrix would send a reconnaissance fleet into human space, not an invasion force officially, but a large enough fleet to demonstrate Vrix power and determination. 10,000 warships, the largest fleet assembled since the last great galactic war. Velnara watched the fleet preparations with growing dread. She had spent decades studying humanity. and she had reached a conclusion that no one else seemed to share. Humanity had not been hiding in fear. They had been transforming into something else. And whatever they had become, they would not react well to an armed fleet invading their space. She requested an audience with the Kelthera overseer. "Do not let them do this," she pleaded. "We do not know what the humans have become. To send a fleet now could be catastrophic." The overseer's scales rippled with dismissive colors. "You have spent too long studying them, Velnara. You have begun to see threats where none exist. Humanity was never a major power. 100 years of isolation cannot have changed that. If anything, they have likely regressed. The Vrix fleet will make contact, establish communication, and resolve this situation. That is all." The fleet departed with great ceremony. War Prince KRX himself commanded from the flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. The fleet crossed into the first silent zone, their progress slow but steady. They broadcast messages as they advanced, informing humanity that the Concordat required dialogue and that resistance would be met with force. For 3 weeks, the fleet penetrated deeper into the silent zones. They reported increasing interference with their systems. Shields required more power to maintain. Weapons took longer to charge. Navigation became increasingly difficult as space itself seemed to push back against their presence. Then on day 22, the first ships began to disappear. It started with scouts at the edges of the formation. They would transmit routine status reports and then nothing. No distress signals. No signs of combat. Just silence. Within hours, dozens of ships had vanished. Then hundreds. The fleet attempted to retreat, but the silent zone had closed behind them. They were trapped in space that fought their every move. More ships disappeared every hour. The crews reported seeing things in the darkness. Shapes that should not exist. Lights that moved with purpose. On day 27, War Prince KRX transmitted his final message. His voice, usually so confident and commanding, carried an edge of fear. "They are here," he said, "all around us. We thought the space was empty, but it is full of them. Ships that phase in and out of existence, weapons we cannot detect until they fire. They have been here the entire time watching. They never stopped building. They never stopped preparing. We were fools to come here. We were fools to think." The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Silence. The entire Vrix fleet, 10,000 warships and their crews, had vanished into the darkness of human space. Not a single vessel returned. No wreckage was ever found. The silent zones remained as impenetrable as ever, and from human space there came no message, no explanation, no contact of any kind, just the same silence that had persisted for 100 years. The galaxy reacted with shock and horror. 10,000 ships did not simply disappear. Whatever had happened to the Vrix fleet, it demonstrated that humanity had become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Velnara received an urgent summons from the Kelthera overseer. When she arrived, she found the ancient being's scales pale with concern. "Tell me," the overseer said without preamble. "What have the humans become?" Velnara looked at the data stream showing the last known positions of the Vrix fleet. "I do not know," she said honestly, "but I know what they were. They were a species that spent their entire history developing the means to kill each other, then choosing not to. They understood violence at a fundamental level, because they lived with its possibility every day. We mocked them for seeking peace. We taught them that mercy was weakness. And now? Now they have had 100 years to reconsider that lesson. 100 years to build. 100 years to transform themselves into whatever they believed necessary to survive in a galaxy that respects only power." The overseer was silent for a long time. What will they do next? Velnara looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there beyond the silent zones, humanity waited, changed, evolved, prepared. "I do not know," she said, "but I fear we are about to find out." The Galactic Concordat met in emergency session 3 days after the Vrix fleet disappeared. Every major power sent their highest-ranking officials. The Great Assembly Hall, usually filled with the routine business of interstellar diplomacy, now crackled with tension and barely suppressed panic. The representative from the Vrix hegemony stood before the assembly. He was young for his species, his chitin still gleaming with colors that older Vrix lost over time. War Prince KRX had no heir, and command had fallen to this junior officer who had been stationed far from the fleet when it vanished. "The Vrix hegemony demands an immediate investigation," the young Vrix said, his voice uncertain despite his attempt at authority. 10,000 ships, nearly 1 million crew members have disappeared. This is an act of war. The Concordat must respond. The Morvain collective pulsed with agitated colors. Respond how? Their spokesperson asked, the harmonic tones carrying an edge of something that might have been fear. 10,000 warships vanished without a trace. We have no enemy to fight. We have no targets to strike. We have only silence. Then we send a larger fleet, the Vrix insisted. 50,000 ships. 100,000. Whatever it takes to pierce the silent zones and discover what happened to our people. No. The word came from an unexpected source. Overseer Sithrak of the Kelthera sovereignty rose from his seat, his scales showing colors of deep concern. We will not repeat the Vrix mistake. To send another fleet would be to send more lives into whatever destroyed the first. You would have us do nothing? The Vrix's mandibles clacked with agitation. You would let this attack go unanswered? It was not an attack, Velnara said, stepping forward from her position behind the Overseer. She had been granted special permission to address the assembly, given her expertise on humanity. The Vrix fleet entered human space uninvited, after 100 years of clearly stated isolation. What did you expect would happen? The Vrix representative turned on her. They destroyed an entire fleet, murdered 1 million beings. You defend this? I defend nothing, Velnara replied calmly. I merely state facts. The humans have been silent for a century. They created barriers specifically to prevent contact. The Vrix chose to force entry. Whatever happened was a response to an invasion of their territory. They are one small species, a delegate from the Palaxi dynasty called out. How could they destroy such a fleet? What weapons could they possibly possess? Velnara activated a holographic display. It showed the data she had compiled over decades of research. Before the humans withdrew, their technology was advancing rapidly. Not in any one direction, but in all directions simultaneously. They pursued quantum computing, artificial intelligence, genetic modification, nanotechnology, exotic matter research, dimensional physics. They were learning everything they could. She brought up images from long-range scans of human space, taken over the years by various observational stations. The images were fuzzy and incomplete, but they showed structures that made no sense according to conventional physics. Look at these, she continued. We have been seeing evidence of massive construction projects for decades. Structures that appear and disappear, ships that exist in multiple spatial states simultaneously. The silent zones themselves demonstrate capabilities we cannot replicate. For 100 years, while we ignored them, the humans were transforming themselves. Into what? The speaker asked. Velnara's scales shifted to colors of uncertainty. I do not know. But I know this, we taught them that mercy was weakness. We showed them that peace was not respected. For 100 years, they have been deciding what they must become to survive in such a galaxy. Now we have our answer. The assembly erupted in argument. Some called for immediate military action. Others urged caution. The minor kingdoms, which had expanded into abandoned human territories, now worried about their newfound colonies. What if humanity decided to reclaim what they had left behind? The Morvain collective proposed a compromise. Send a diplomatic mission. A single ship unarmed with representatives from all major powers. Approach the silent zones and request dialogue. If the humans have truly evolved as researcher Velnara suggests, then they are powerful enough that we must negotiate. If they are merely hiding behind sophisticated defenses, then they will not dare to attack ambassadors from the entire Concordat. The debate raged for 3 days. Finally, exhausted and frightened, the assembly agreed. A diplomatic mission would be sent. But the military powers also made preparations. Fleets began to mobilize along the borders of human space. Not to invade, they claimed, but to be ready, just in case. The young Vrix representative stood before Overseer Sithrak after the session ended. You truly believe the humans could have destroyed our fleet? He asked quietly. The Overseer's scales showed colors of grim certainty. I believe we do not know what the humans have become, and that ignorance is the most dangerous thing of all. 2 weeks later, the diplomatic vessel approached the nearest silent zone. The ship carried representatives from every major power, including a very reluctant Vrix junior officer and Velnara herself. They broadcast their peaceful intentions on all frequencies as they approached. The moment they entered the silent zone, everything changed. The ship's faster-than-light drive shut down immediately, just as predicted. But more than that, every electronic system began behaving strangely. Sensors showed readings that contradicted each other. Navigation displayed impossible spatial coordinates. The crew reported feeling disoriented, as if their sense of direction had become confused. This is more than interference with ship systems, the Morvain scientist on board reported. This is fundamental alteration of space-time itself. The power requirements to generate such an effect across such a vast volume would require the energy output of multiple stars. They pressed onward, their ship crawling at sublight speed. Days passed. Then weeks. The deeper they went into the silent zone, the stranger things became. Crew members reported seeing structures outside the viewports that did not appear on sensors. Lights that moved with purpose. Shapes that seemed to exist at the edge of perception. On day 37 of their journey, they made first contact. It was not a ship that approached them. It was something else. The sensors struggled to define it. Sometimes it appeared as a vessel, sometimes as a field of energy, sometimes as nothing at all, present only as a distortion in space itself. The communications officer received a transmission. "This is Human Space Border Control. State your purpose." The voice was mechanical, translated through systems that made it impossible to tell if it came from a living being or an artificial intelligence. The assembled delegates looked at each other. Finally, Velnara stepped forward to the communication station. "This is researcher Velnara of the Kelthara Sovereignty, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Concordat. We come seeking dialogue. We wish to understand what happened to the Vrix fleet and to re-establish communication with humanity." There was a long pause. The thing outside their ship remained, its form shifting and indistinct. The Vrix fleet entered restricted space after explicit warnings. They were given opportunities to withdraw. They chose to continue. Consequences followed. What consequences? The Vrix officer demanded. "Where are our people? Where are our ships?" Another pause. Then, "Intact, preserved, catalogued. You may have them back when appropriate terms are established." Shock rippled through the diplomatic vessel. The Vrix fleet was not destroyed? Their crews were alive? "You took them prisoner?" Velnara asked carefully. "We prevented them from causing damage. We protected ourselves. Your concepts of war and peace do not apply to current circumstances. Wait here, someone will speak with you." The presence vanished. The diplomatic vessel drifted in the darkness, surrounded by the strange forces of the silent zone. The delegates argued about what to do. Some wanted to turn back immediately. Others insisted they had to see this through. 3 days later, a ship arrived. But calling it a ship did not do it justice. It appeared in space without any visible means of propulsion, existing in a way that made the sensors scream with contradictory data. It seemed to be solid and transparent simultaneously. It was both present and absent. Looking at it made Velnara's eyes hurt, as if her brain could not properly process what it was seeing. From this impossible vessel came a message. "Permission to dock?" The captain of the diplomatic vessel looked to the delegates. Velnara nodded. What choice did they have? The docking procedure defied everything they knew about physics. The human ship did not physically connect to their vessel. Instead, a section of their hull simply became a doorway leading somewhere else. The delegates gathered in the docking bay, watching as a figure stepped through. It was human, or it had been human, or it was something that chose to appear human. Velnara could not tell which. The figure looked like a woman in her 60s dressed in a simple gray uniform. But there was something wrong about her. She moved with absolute precision. Her eyes seemed to look through them rather than at them, and around her, space itself seemed to bend slightly as if reality found her presence uncomfortable. "Ambassador Vasquez," the figure said, her voice warm but strange. Or what was once Ambassador Vasquez. "I am part of what she became. It is easier for you if I appear this way. My true form would be difficult for your perceptions to process." The delegate stared. Velnara found her voice first. "What happened to you? To humanity?" The figure that called itself Vasquez smiled. It was not quite a human expression anymore. "We learned. We adapted. We transcended. You taught us that mercy from weakness is not respected. So we removed the weakness." She gestured, and the space around them changed. Suddenly they were not in the docking bay, but somewhere else entirely. A vast chamber filled with light and impossible geometry. And in that chamber they saw the Vrix fleet, every single ship floating in stasis fields. And beyond them, hundreds of thousands of human forms. Not bodies, but consciousnesses existing as pure information and energy. The humans had not died. They had evolved past the need for physical form. We are no longer what we were, Vasquez said. We are something new. Part biological, part digital, part quantum. We exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. We have merged with our machines, our artificial intelligences, our very understanding of reality itself. We are humanity transformed. By what right? The VRIX officer shouted. By what right do you hold our people? Vasquez turned to him, and for a moment he saw something vast and incomprehensible behind her human facade. By the same right you claimed when you destroyed the New Horizon. By the same right you invoked when you laughed at our pleas for peace. We have become what you forced us to become. We have transcended your concepts of strength and weakness. The vision shifted again. Now they saw Earth. But it was not the planet they remembered from old records. It was something else. The planet was still there, but it was surrounded by structures that hurt to look at. Rings of energy that connected to points in space where no destinations should exist. Clouds of nanomachines that could reconfigure matter at the molecular level. Consciousness itself woven into the fabric of space-time. For 100 years we have been building this, Vasquez said. Not weapons, though we can defend ourselves as you have learned. Not in pursuit of conquest, but in pursuit of something else. We have been trying to answer a question. What question? Velnara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Vasquez looked at her with eyes that seemed to contain entire universes. You taught us that mercy is weakness. We spent 100 years asking, is that true? If we become powerful enough that no one can threaten us, can mercy be our choice again? If we hold absolute power, can we choose not to use it? The vision changed once more. They saw the galaxy as the humans now saw it. Every star, every planet, every ship tracked and known. The human network extended throughout space, invisible but all-encompassing. They had not been hiding. They had been watching everything. We could end you, Vasquez said simply. All of you. Every species in the Concordat. We have had that power for decades. Do you understand? We could have destroyed the VRIX hegemony. We could have dismantled the Kelthera sovereignty. We could have scattered the Morvain collective to the stellar winds. We did not. Why? The Morvain delegate asked, its harmonics showing genuine confusion. Because we decided you were wrong, Vasquez said. Mercy from strength is not weakness. It is the purest form of strength. To have power and choose not to use it. To be capable of destruction and choose creation instead. That is what we have spent 100 years learning. She gestured, and they were back in their ship. The impossible human vessel was gone. The delegates stood in their docking bay, shaken and confused. A transmission came through. Vasquez's voice, but now it came from everywhere at once, as if space itself was speaking. Return to the Concordat. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them that humanity has evolved beyond their understanding. Tell them we have the power to end them all and choose not to. Tell them that choice made freely when we hold all the weapons is true mercy. And tell them one more thing. What? Velnara asked. Tell them that if they send another fleet into our space, if they threaten us again, we will defend ourselves. And next time we will not be so gentle. The VRIX fleet survives because we allowed it. That was mercy. They should not mistake it for weakness again. The diplomatic vessel was suddenly outside the silent zone. One moment they were deep in human space, the next they were at the border. The humans had simply moved them, transporting the entire ship across light years in an instant. As they prepared to return to Axiom Prime, Velnara looked back at the silent zone. Somewhere in there, humanity waited, changed, transcendent, powerful beyond measure, and choosing for now to be merciful. What will you tell the Concordat? One of the other delegates asked her. Velnara's scales showed colors of fear and wonder mixed together. The truth, she said, that we created something terrible when we rejected their peace, and that we should be grateful they are better than we are. The diplomatic vessel jumped to faster than light speed, racing back to the Concordat with news that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, in the depths of human space, Ambassador Vasquez and the billions of transformed humans watched them go. Will they listen? One consciousness asked another. Some will, Vasquez replied. Others will not. And if they come again? Vasquez's distributed consciousness rippled with something that might have been sadness. Then we show them the truth. That mercy requires strength, and that we have both. The diplomatic vessel returned to Axiom Prime, carrying news that would shatter the galaxy's understanding of reality itself. As the delegates disembarked, they found the great assembly hall already packed with representatives from every concordant member. Word had somehow spread that something momentous had occurred. Velnara stood before the assembled powers, her scales shifting through colors of anxiety and determination. Beside her stood the other delegates who had witnessed humanity's transformation. They had spent the journey back trying to find words to describe what they had seen. Words failed them then, and they failed them now. "The Vrix fleet is alive," she began. The assembly erupted in shock and confusion. She waited for silence before continuing. "They are held in stasis fields within human space. Every ship intact. Every crew member preserved. The humans did not destroy them. They captured them." "Impossible," the young Vrix representative said. "To capture 10,000 warships without a trace of battle? Without any communication or distress signal? What force could achieve this?" Velnara looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "A force we cannot comprehend. Humanity has transcended biology. They exist as hybrid entities, part organic, part machine, part quantum consciousness. They have rewritten the laws of physics within their space. They have become something we have no words for." She activated the holographic display. The images were fragmentary, recorded from their sensors during the encounter. They showed the impossible human ship, its form shifting and contradictory. They showed the vast chamber where the Vrix fleet floated like insects preserved in amber. They showed glimpses of Earth transformed into something that looked more like a living organism than a planet. "This is not possible," the Morvain delegate insisted. "Its harmonics showing distress. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of their entire stellar system. The physics involved violate causality itself." "Yet they have done it," Velnara said. "They have had 100 years of isolation to pursue every avenue of research simultaneously. No oversight, no ethical constraints beyond their own. They have merged with their artificial intelligences, restructured their own biology at the quantum level, and learned to manipulate space-time itself." Overseer Sithrak rose from his seat. His scales showed colors of grim acceptance. "She speaks truth. I have reviewed the sensor data personally. The silent zones are not defensive barriers. They are the edges of transformed space itself. Within those zones, the humans have rewritten reality according to their will." The assembly dissolved into chaos. Delegates shouted over each other, demanding answers, proposing solutions, arguing about what this meant. Finally, the speaker's voice cut through the noise. "What do the humans want?" the ancient being asked. "Did they make demands?" Velnara felt something cold settle in her chest. "They want nothing from us. That is what makes them terrifying. They demonstrated that they have had the power to destroy us all for decades. They chose not to. They call it mercy from strength." "Mercy?" The young Vrix officer's mandibles clacked with anger. "They imprison our fleet and call it mercy?" "Yes," Velnara said quietly. "Because they could have done so much worse. The entity we spoke with made that very clear. They preserved your people when they could have atomized them. That was a choice. A demonstration. Demonstration of what? That they are better than we are." Silence fell across the assembly. The implications of Velnara's words sank in slowly like poison. "What happens if we demand the return of the Vrix fleet?" a delegate from the Palaxi dynasty asked. "They said it would be returned when appropriate terms are established," Velnara replied. "I believe they are waiting to see how we respond. Whether we learned anything from this." The debate continued for days. The Concordat split into factions. Some argued for immediate military buildup, massing fleets at the borders of human space as a show of strength. Others counseled diplomacy and caution. The minor kingdoms, terrified of being caught in a conflict with beings who could rewrite physics, argued for complete capitulation to whatever terms humanity might propose. The Vrix hegemony demanded action. Without War Prince Karex and with their main fleet held hostage, they had lost much of their political power. But they still commanded respect and fear throughout the galaxy. "We cannot allow this to stand," the young Vrix officer declared. "To accept this humiliation is to invite every species to see us as weak. We must respond with strength." "What strength?" Velnara challenged. 10,000 of your best warships vanished without firing a shot. What makes you think a larger fleet would fare any better? Then what do you propose? That we beg? That we surrender to these transformed creatures and hope they show us mercy?" Velnara's scales showed colors of frustration. "Yes, exactly that. Because they have already shown us mercy." Our failure to recognize it is our problem, not theirs. The VRIX officer looked at her with something approaching pity. You have been studying them too long. You have begun to think like them. Mercy is weakness. Power respects only power. That is what we taught them, Velnara said softly, and they took that lesson to its logical conclusion. They became powerful enough that nothing in the galaxy can threaten them. And then they chose mercy anyway. They proved us wrong. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened next. 3 weeks after the diplomatic mission returned, the VRIX hegemony made a fateful decision. They began massing their remaining military forces at the human border. Not to invade, they claimed, but to establish a security presence, to show humanity that the VRIX were still a power to be respected. It was the worst decision they could have made. The military buildup took months. The VRIX called in favors, recalled distant fleets, and even conscripted merchant vessels to bolster their numbers. They assembled nearly 200,000 warships, the largest fleet in VRIX history. It was a force designed to intimidate, to prove that the loss of 10,000 ships had not broken their power. War Sovereign Carex II, the young officer who had assumed command after the first war prince's disappearance, led the fleet personally. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the assembled armada with pride. Let the humans see this, he declared. Let them understand that the VRIX hegemony does not cower. We do not beg. We demand the return of our people with honor. Velnara, watching from Axiom Prime through long-range sensors, felt her scales turn pale with dread. They are making a terrible mistake, she said to Overseer Sithrak. The humans warned us. They said next time would be different. Can we stop this? The Overseer asked. I do not know if anyone can stop this now. The VRIX fleet approached the silent zone in battle formation. They broadcast their demands on all frequencies. Return the original fleet immediately. Accept Concordat oversight of human space. Submit to inspection to ensure no further dangerous research. For 3 days there was no response. The VRIX fleet held position at the edge of the silent zone, waiting. Some of the more nervous commanders suggested withdrawal. War Sovereign Carex refused. On the 4th day, humanity answered. A single ship emerged from the silent zone. It was similar to the vessel that had contacted the diplomatic mission, but larger. Much larger. It appeared in space without any visible transition, simply existing where it had not existed a moment before. From this ship came a transmission, not the mechanical voice of a border control system, but Ambassador Elena Vasquez herself, or the entity that had once been Elena Vasquez, War Sovereign. Her voice carried a weight that made even the VRIX commander uncomfortable. You were warned. You chose not to listen. You have massed a fleet at our border in an act of aggression. You demand the return of hostages as if you have any right to make demands. You threaten inspection of our space as if you have authority over us. All of this after we showed you mercy. We are the VRIX hegemony, Carex II replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We do not— You do not understand, Vasquez interrupted. That is the problem. You still think in terms of military power and territorial control. You still believe that strength is measured in the number of ships you can assemble. You learned nothing from the last century, so we will teach you. The space around the VRIX fleet changed. Reality itself seemed to ripple. The sensors on every ship screamed warnings as the fundamental constants of physics began to shift. Time dilation effects made seconds stretch into minutes. Gravity fluctuated wildly. The fabric of space-time itself became hostile. What is happening? Carex demanded of his science officers. The humans are projecting a field that restructures local space, came the panicked reply. Our shields are failing. Our weapons will not charge. The ship systems are shutting down. All across the fleet the same thing occurred. 200,000 warships, the pride of the VRIX hegemony, became nothing more than metal shells drifting in space. Not destroyed. Simply rendered inert. Powerless. Vasquez's voice continued, now coming from every speaker in every ship simultaneously. You see, we do not need to destroy you. We can simply turn off your technology. We can make your weapons useless, your shields irrelevant, your mighty fleet nothing but debris waiting to fall. She paused, letting the lesson sink in. But we will not do that, not yet. Instead, we will show you something. The space in front of the VRIX fleet opened, not like a door or a portal. It was more fundamental than that. Reality folded, and through the fold, the Vrix crew saw something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They saw themselves. Billions of Vrix living their lives across the hegemony. They saw their home worlds, their colonies, their civilian populations going about their daily existence. And surrounding all of it, invisible to normal perception, they saw the human network, sensors, monitoring systems, quantum observers. Humanity had been watching every Vrix world for decades. "We know where all of you are," Vasquez said simply. "Every world, every ship, every life. We have had this knowledge for years. We have had the power to end you for years. We chose not to. That was mercy. Do you understand it now? Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the choice to not use power when you possess it." The vision continued. Now the Vrix crew saw simulations, mathematical models showing what would happen if humanity chose to act. Stars going dark as their energy was redirected, planets being moved out of their orbits, fleets being disassembled at the molecular level, not fantasies or propaganda. These were actual calculations, showing the precise methods by which humanity could end the Vrix hegemony in hours if they chose to. "We could do this," Vasquez said. "We have the power. We have had it for a long time. We did not use it because we are better than that. We are better than you." The reality fold closed. The Vrix fleet drifted in space, their systems slowly coming back online. But everything had changed. Every Vrix officer, every crew member had seen the truth. They were insects next to gods, and the gods were choosing to let them live. War Sovereign Caharex II sat in his command chair, his mandibles hanging open in shock. Around him, his bridge crew stared at their instruments with expressions of disbelief and terror. "They could have done this at any time," his science officer whispered. "The First Fleet, they did not destroy them, because destruction would have been wasteful. They simply turned off their systems and collected them like specimens." Caharex felt something he had never experienced before. Not just fear, something deeper. Humility. The recognition that everything he believed about power and strength was wrong. "Hail the human vessel," he said quietly. "War Sovereign?" His communications officer looked uncertain. "Do it." A connection was established. The image of Elena Vasquez appeared on the main screen. She looked almost human, but the crew could sense the vast intelligence behind her eyes, the transcendent being wearing a familiar shape to make communication possible. "Ambassador Vasquez," Caharex said, and his voice cracked slightly. The Vrix hegemony," and he stopped. What words could possibly suffice? What could he say to a being that had just demonstrated the power to end his entire civilization? Vasquez waited patiently. When he did not continue, she spoke. "You came here in force because you thought it would make you strong. You demanded terms because you thought you had leverage. You have learned otherwise. The question now is, what will you do with this knowledge?" Caharex looked at his officers. He saw his own shock reflected in their faces. Then slowly he understood what he had to do, what honor required, not the false honor of pride and dominance, but the true honor of recognizing when you had been bested. He stood. Around him the entire bridge crew stood as well. Then, in a gesture that no Vrix had made to another species in 1,000 years, War Sovereign Caharex II lowered the war banner of his hegemony. It was a small thing, a traditional gesture that might have meant nothing to outsiders, but to the Vrix it meant everything. It was the ultimate admission of defeat. The acknowledgement that another power was not just superior but beyond challenge. "The Vrix hegemony surrenders to humanity," Caharex said, his voice steady now. "We accept your mercy. We acknowledge your power. We ask for the return of our people and an end to hostilities." Across the fleet, 200,000 ships lowered their weapons, not because their systems had been disabled, but because their commanders chose to. It was surrender, complete and total. Vasquez's expression softened slightly. "This is what we wanted. Not surrender. Understanding. The recognition that mercy from strength is not weakness, that true power is in the choice." "You will return our people?" Caharex asked. "When you are ready to receive them. When they have learned what you are learning now. They are not prisoners. They are students being taught the same lesson you learned today. When they understand as you now understand, they will be released." The human ship began to fade from view. Before it disappeared completely, Vasquez spoke one more time. "Tell the Concordat what happened here. Tell them the Vrix hegemony, the greatest military power in the galaxy, stood before humanity and chose wisdom over pride. Tell them that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is recognize when you have been wrong. The ship vanished. The Vrix fleet was left floating in space, their systems functional but their purpose shattered. They had come to demonstrate strength. They had learned humility instead. As news of what happened spread across the galaxy, every member of the Concordat had to face an uncomfortable truth. Humanity had not just become powerful, they had become what they always claimed to be, a species that valued mercy over dominance, peace over war, wisdom over pride. And they had proven it in the only way the galaxy would accept, by having the power to destroy everyone and choosing not to. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Concordat had never been so full. Every seat was occupied. Delegates stood in the aisles when no seats remained. The galleries meant for observers were packed with representatives, from minor species who had no official voice but needed to witness what was about to happen. 3 months had passed since the Vrix hegemony lowered their banners before humanity. 3 months since War Sovereign Kyrex II returned to Vrix space and delivered his report to a shocked and humiliated people. 3 months since the galaxy realized that the order they had known for millennia had fundamentally changed. Now, for the first time in 103 years, humanity was returning to the Concordat. Velnara stood in the Kelthera section, her scales showing colors of anticipation and nervousness. Beside her, Overseer Sithrak remained perfectly still, but she knew him well enough to sense his tension. Everyone in the hall was tense. They were about to meet the beings that had transcended known physics, that held the power of life and death over every species in the galaxy, and had chosen to show mercy. The speaker called the assembly to order. The ancient being's tendrils wavered with uncertainty as it spoke. The Concordat recognizes Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth. We welcome humanity back to these chambers. The doors opened. What walked through them took everyone's breath away. Elena Vasquez looked exactly as she had 103 years ago. The same face, the same simple blue diplomatic uniform, the same confident stride. But everyone in the chamber could sense that something was different. The space around her seemed to bend slightly, as if reality itself acknowledged her presence. Her eyes held depths that suggested she was looking at them from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Behind her walked a small delegation of humans, or beings that appeared human. Each one wore the same blue uniform. Each one carried that same sense of otherness, of being more than they appeared. Velnara recognized one of them. Admiral Marcus Chen, who had stood beside Ambassador Vasquez at that fateful assembly a century ago. He too looked unchanged by time, though he would have to be over 150 years old by now. The human delegation reached the central platform. Vasquez looked around the chamber at the assembled species. When her gaze passed over Velnara, the researcher felt as if she was being seen completely, every thought and memory laid bare. It was not threatening. It was just thorough. "Thank you, Speaker," Vasquez said. Her voice sounded human, but it carried harmonics that the translation system struggled to interpret. She was speaking in multiple languages simultaneously, her words reaching each delegate in their own tongue without need for technology. "It has been a long time." "Welcome back, Ambassador," the speaker said. "Though we understand you are no longer simply Ambassador Vasquez." A slight smile crossed Vasquez's face. "No, I am what Ambassador Vasquez became. Part of me is still her, the woman who stood in this very spot and pleaded for peace. Part of me is something else now. But for simplicity, you may continue to call me Elena." The young Vrix war sovereign stood. His mandibles did not click with amusement or pride as his predecessors had. He had learned humility the hard way. "Ambassador Vasquez, the Vrix hegemony wishes to formally apologize for the destruction of the New Horizon and for the invasions of your space. We were wrong. We understand that now." Elena regarded him thoughtfully. "Thank you, War Sovereign. But you do not apologize to me alone. You apologize to the 15,000 souls who died on the New Horizon. You apologize to the generations of humans who had to transform themselves into what you see before you, because the galaxy taught them that mercy was weakness." She turned to address the full assembly. "Let me be clear about what happened. 103 years ago, humanity came to you in peace. We sought cooperation, trade, friendship. We were rejected, mocked. When our people were slaughtered, we were told to file a complaint and wait. The galaxy taught us a lesson. That power is the only thing respected, and mercy is seen as weakness. Her voice remained calm, but everyone in the chamber felt the weight behind her words. We learned that lesson well. We went home and asked ourselves, what must we become to survive in a galaxy like this? The answer we found was terrifying. We had to become powerful enough that nothing could threaten us. Powerful enough that the choice to show mercy would come from strength, not weakness. Admiral Chen stepped forward. For 100 years, we transformed ourselves. We merged with our artificial intelligences, achieving a synthesis of biological intuition and computational power. We restructured our biology at the quantum level, learning to exist across multiple dimensions. We mastered technologies you consider theoretically impossible. We became, in your terms, gods. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates shouted denials. Others sat in shocked silence. The Morvain collective pulsed with colors of distress. Elena raised a hand and silence fell instantly. Not because she commanded it, but because reality itself seemed to hold its breath when she moved. We could have used that power for revenge, she continued. We could have destroyed the Vrix hegemony for what they did to the New Horizon. We could have dismantled the Concordat for allowing it to happen. For 100 years, we held the power to remake the galaxy however we wished. Do you know why we did not? No one answered. The question hung in the air like a judgment. Because we are better than that, Elena said simply. Because we remembered who we were before the galaxy tried to teach us otherwise. We are a species that has always struggled with our capacity for violence. We spent our entire history learning to choose peace over war, cooperation over conflict, mercy over revenge. The galaxy tried to teach us to forget those lessons. We refused to forget. She gestured and the holographic display activated. Images appeared above the assembly. Every delegate saw their own worlds, their own people, surrounded by the invisible human network that had been watching them for decades. We have had the power to end any of you for years, Elena said. The Vrix learned this truth 3 months ago. Now you all will learn it. We have sensors watching every world. We have weapons that could shatter stars. We have technologies that could rewrite the laws of physics across entire sectors of space. We are, by any measure, the supreme power in this galaxy. The images shifted. Now they showed simulations, mathematical projections of what humanity could do if they chose. Species ending in moments. Civilizations scattered. The galaxy reshaped according to human will. This is our power, Elena said. This is what we became. And now I will tell you the most important thing you need to understand. We choose not to use it. Not because we are weak. Not because we fear you. But because mercy from strength is the highest form of power. To hold absolute dominion and choose compassion instead. That is what separates civilization from barbarism. Overseer Sithrak stood, his scales showing colors of deep thought. You are saying that you have proven us wrong. That mercy is not weakness after all. Yes, Elena said, but more than that. We are saying that the galaxy's philosophy, the idea that power respects only power, creates an endless cycle of violence. Someone is always seeking more power to feel safe. Someone is always threatening someone else to maintain their position. We are offering a different way. What way? A delegate from one of the minor kingdoms asked. Admiral Chen answered. Assured mutual protection. Humanity has the power to defend any species from any threat. We offer to use that power not for domination, but for genuine peace. Not peace through fear, but peace through choice. What, you want to become our protectors? The Vrix war sovereign sounded skeptical. To make us dependent on your mercy? No, Elena said firmly. We want to create a galaxy where mercy is the norm, not the exception. Where species seek cooperation because it serves everyone, not because they fear punishment. We will share our knowledge gradually and carefully. We will help you advance, but we will not tolerate aggression, genocide, or the casual cruelty that has defined galactic politics for too long. The speaker's tendrils waved uncertainly. This is a radical change to the Concordat structure. You are proposing that humanity become in effect the enforcers of peace. Not enforcers, Elena corrected. Guarantors. There is a difference. Enforcers impose their will through threat. Guarantors protect through commitment. We are committing to defend the weak, to prevent wars of aggression, to ensure that what happened to the New Horizon never happens to anyone again. Velnara found herself standing. Her scales showed colors of hope and uncertainty. Ambassador Vasquez, you speak of sharing knowledge. of helping us advance, but you have transcended biology itself. How can we possibly follow where you have gone?" Elena smiled at her, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. "You cannot, researcher Velnara. Not completely. The path we took was specific to humanity, shaped by our history and psychology, but you can advance along your own paths. We can show you technologies, sciences, understandings that will let each species transcend their current limitations in their own way." "And the price for this help?" Overseer Sithrak asked. "What do you require in return?" "That you stop teaching young species that mercy is weakness," Admiral Chen said. "That you create a concordat based on genuine cooperation, rather than competition for dominance. That you try, as we tried, to be better than your worst impulses." The assembly fell into discussion. Delegates argued with each other, their voices rising and falling in waves of debate. Some feared human dominance disguised as protection. Others embraced the possibility of advancement under human guidance. The minor kingdoms, long pressed between the major powers, saw hope for genuine security. Finally, the Vrix war sovereign stood again. His posture was different now, less aggressive, more thoughtful. The Vrix hegemony has always believed that strength defines right. We have always taken what we could hold, ruled what we could dominate. Ambassador Vasquez has shown us the flaw in that thinking. True strength is in choosing not to dominate when you have the power to do so. He performed the formal Vrix gesture of profound respect, lowering his head until his mandibles nearly touched the floor. The Vrix hegemony accepts humanity's proposal. We lower our banners not in defeat but in recognition of a better way. We ask to learn from you. One by one, other delegations stood. The Kelthera sovereignty added their support. The Morvain collective, after lengthy harmonic consultation among themselves, agreed. The minor kingdoms, seeing a chance for protection from the predations of larger powers, supported the proposal enthusiastically. Not everyone agreed immediately. Some of the more traditional powers objected, worried about losing their autonomy, but even they could not deny the reality. Humanity had become something beyond their capacity to challenge. The choice was not whether to accept human influence, but whether to accept it gracefully or be forced to accept it later. The vote took 3 days. In the end, the Concordat Reformed Accords were approved by an overwhelming majority. Humanity would rejoin the Concordat not as equals but as guarantors of peace. They would share knowledge, protect the weak, and prevent wars of aggression. In return, they asked only that the species of the galaxy try to be better than they had been. On the final day of the assembly, Elena stood once more before the gathered delegates. "We want you to understand something important," she said. "We did not seek this power. We did not want to become what we are. You forced us to transform by teaching us that mercy was weakness. We proved you wrong, but the cost was high. We gave up much of our humanity to transcend it. We became something other to prove we could still choose to be something better." She paused, her expression showing something that might have been sadness. "Do not force other species to follow our path. Do not teach them that mercy is weakness. Teach them what we learned, that the highest form of strength is choosing not to use power when you possess it. That mercy is not about being too weak to fight, but about being strong enough not to need to." Admiral Chen added his voice. "The Vrix fleet, both the first and second, will be returned within the month. Their crews have been learning these lessons. They have been seeing what we saw. When they return, listen to them. Learn from their experience." Elena looked around the chamber one last time. "We came to the stars a century ago hoping to find friends. We found something else. We learned terrible lessons and became terrible in response. But we remembered in the end who we wanted to be. We remembered that mercy matters, that compassion has value, that peace is not weakness but wisdom. We hope you will remember these things too." She turned to leave, her delegation following. But before she reached the door, she stopped and looked back. "One more thing," she said. "The silent zones will remain, not as barriers but as reminders. Reminders that we transformed ourselves out of necessity, that we became powerful enough to defend our right to choose mercy. Let those zones remind you that the greatest weapon is the one you never have to use. Let them remind you that true power is in the choice." The human delegation departed. The great assembly hall erupted in discussion that would continue for weeks. Treaties would have to be rewritten. Power structures would have to be reorganized. The entire galaxy would have to adapt to this new reality. But the most important change had already occurred. Every species present had learned the lesson that humanity had paid so dearly to teach. That mercy from strength is not weakness. that choosing compassion when you could choose destruction is the mark of true civilization. Years later, the Concordat Academy established a new course of study. It was taught by both humans and by members of other species who had learned the lessons well. The course was called The Philosophy of Restrained Power, but students called it by a simpler name: the human paradox. The paradox was this: humanity had become powerful enough to dominate the galaxy through force, yet they achieved true dominance only when they chose not to use that force. They had transcended their biology to prove they could transcend their worst impulses. They had become gods to prove that God should choose to be kind. Velnara, now an elder researcher, taught this course to young Kelthera students. She would begin each semester by showing them the image of Ambassador Vasquez standing before the Concordat 103 years ago, pleading for peace and cooperation. Then she would show them the image of Elena Vasquez returning, transformed into something beyond nature, carrying power beyond measure. "This is what we did to them," she would tell her students. "We took a species that wanted to be kind and forced them to become powerful. We mocked their mercy until they had no choice but to transcend weakness itself. And then, when they held all the power, when they could have destroyed us all in revenge, they chose mercy again. But this time it was mercy from strength, and that made all the difference." "Why did they choose mercy?" a young student asked one day. Velnara's scales showed colors of deep satisfaction. "Because they understood something we are only now learning. That the measure of a civilization is not in its weapons or its territory or its power. It is in what that civilization chooses not to do when it has the power to do anything. Humanity chose to be better than we deserved. That choice, made freely when they held every weapon, is why we all lowered our banners, not in defeat, but in recognition. On Earth, in a garden that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, Elena Vasquez walked among flowers that bloomed in colors no natural eye could perceive. She was not alone. All around her, the distributed consciousnesses of transformed humanity moved through their strange new existence. Admiral Chen's presence joined hers. "Do you think they learned?" he asked. "Some did," Elena replied. "Others are still learning. But the galaxy is changing. Slowly, but it is changing. Wars of aggression are becoming rare. Species are choosing dialogue over destruction. The minor kingdoms no longer live in fear." "Was it worth it?" Chen asked. "What we gave up to become this?" Elena looked at her hands. They appeared human, but she knew they were so much more now. She existed across dimensions, her consciousness distributed throughout space-time. She could see the past and probable futures. She could shape reality with a thought. She had become something beyond humanity. "I do not know," she said honestly. "We gave up so much to gain the power to choose mercy. Sometimes I wonder if there was another way. But I know this. When I stood in that assembly hall a century ago and watched them mock our pleas for peace, watched them dismiss the deaths of 15,000 innocents, I felt something break inside me. We could have become monsters then. We had every reason to become monsters. But we did not. No. We became powerful enough that we did not need to be monsters. We became so powerful that mercy became a choice instead of a necessity. And in making that choice, we proved that the galaxy was wrong about us, about mercy, about what truly matters." Chen's presence flickered with something that might have been satisfaction. "The New Horizon is remembered now. There is a memorial station at the place where she fell. Representatives from every Concordat species come to pay respects, to remember what happens when mercy is mistaken for weakness." "Good," Elena said. "Let them remember. Let them remember that 15,000 deaths taught humanity what it needed to become. Let them remember that we could have repaid that debt with interest, could have killed billions in revenge, and let them remember that we chose not to." She looked up at the stars visible through the garden's dimensional boundaries. Out there across the galaxy, species were learning. Not quickly enough, perhaps. Not completely. But they were learning. "We showed them that mercy from strength is not weakness," she said. "We proved that choosing compassion when you could choose destruction is the mark of true civilization. That is our legacy. Not our power, but our choice." Admiral Chen agreed. "And if they forget? If new species arise that need to learn the same lessons? Then we will teach them," Elena said simply. "Not with weapons, not with threats, but by continuing to choose mercy when we have every reason to choose otherwise. That is what humanity has always done best. We face our own capacity for violence every day and choose to be better. Now we do it on a galactic scale." They stood together in the impossible garden, Two beings that had once been human and were now something more, watching over a galaxy that was slowly learning to be better than it had been. The silent zones remained as monuments to what humanity had become. But more importantly, they served as reminders of what humanity had chosen to remain. A species that valued mercy over power, compassion over dominance, peace over war. And across the galaxy, in assembly halls and classrooms, in military academies and philosophical societies, beings of every species learned the lesson that humanity had paid so dearly to teach. When you hold absolute power, when you can do anything without consequences, the greatest act of strength is choosing to be kind. That was why all the kingdoms had lowered their banners. Not because humanity forced them to, but because humanity showed them a better way. And in doing so, humanity fulfilled the promise they had made 103 years ago. They had returned on very different terms. They had returned as teachers, as guardians, as proof that mercy from strength is the highest form of power, and the galaxy, humbled and awed, was finally ready to learn.